Welcome to the TTS Talking Educators podcast. Each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in educational settings. Hi, my name is Dr. Shaddai Tembo, your host for this week's TTS Talking Educators podcast. I'm a senior lecturer at Bath Spa University, an associate lecturer at the Open University, and an independent writer, speaker and consultant with critical early years. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at supporting oracy in primary and early year settings, inspiring you with guidance and resources to enhance your practice. Now, this week, I'm delighted to introduce Rob Jennings as our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Rob. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's lovely to have you on the podcast. But before we get started, perhaps you could give an introduction to yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a maths teaching specialist. I've been teaching people that struggle with maths across all age ranges for about 15 years. And I'm a co-founder of the Dyscalculia Network. It's a place for people to go to get information if they're struggling or have difficulty with maths.
Brilliant. And in this third episode, we're still drilling down into practical strategies and opportunities to support those children with dyscalculia in the classroom. So to begin, I'm interested in this idea of safe talk. What does that mean and how can it be used to support young children?
Well, I suppose safe talk provides a supportive and non-judgmental communication, because it allows the children to express themselves in a way. And I think kind of most of the students that I've been working with, you almost have to convince them that it's, the old adage that, you learn so much from making mistakes. But I think all students need to be convinced of that. And I think kind of safe talk allows them to sort of think it's not a problem to make a mistake, or to say there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I think kind of that, having that sort of environment and stuff to sort of be able to say any of those things is really quite key. And it's dependent on the relationship between the teacher and the students. So I think it's really important to make them feel safe to be able to say anything.
I guess there's a connection to children's sense of identity and well-being, and how that's particularly important for children with dyscalculia, where they may be more likely to be stigmatised or pointed out for not quite grasping something in the same way that other children are. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. It's also important to reduce any anxiety that they may face, because obviously there's a lot of overlap between maths anxiety and people with dyscalculia. And often they're confused, the terms, because I think people with dyscalculia are really used to sort of failing in maths or making errors and lack of understanding. So naturally they're going to have high levels of maths anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And the point of anxiety for all students, but particularly those with learning differences, is perhaps around assessment. So yeah. I'm wondering what schools can do to make that process easier for those children. Are there alternative forms of understanding children's level of development, or what guidance do you give to teachers there? Well,
it varies between different levels. Say at the GCSE level, there are certain maths boards that offer papers which you can use your calculator for both, for example, the IGCSE. And I think kind of that gives students so much more confidence that they have their technologically advanced friend with them to be able to help out. Because, as we said before, dyscalculia really does impact on the foundation levels and that basic arithmetic in terms of fluency and stuff like that. So if we can take that away, that worry, is going to be really important in helping them develop.
I'm wondering about, connected to assessment to an extent, the role of gender, because actually when we look at the assessment outcomes across all levels, we see that girls are consistently assessed of achieving a higher level than boys throughout all stages of their schooling and early years experiences. I'm wondering how gender intersects with dyscalculia? Does it lead to a situation in which some children are more or less likely to be diagnosed with that? Is there any consequences for how that appears or shows up in the classroom environment? I wonder.
It's interesting because we were invited to a presentation by National Numeracy in the city last month, and there's some really good speakers there and talking about in different sex schools, when girls are in the same sex schools, they're much more relaxed in terms of mathematics and much more willing to give things a go, whereas when they're in a mixed school environment, they're often, again, it's a bit of a generalisation, but this is from, they're reluctant to sort of take a risk. They're much more sort of reserved in terms of their maths ability. And all of those kind of safe talk and giving things a go by, making mistakes, they're less likely to do. So it's going to impact on their performance moving forward. So the research isn't clear about whether there's no difference between the number of people dyscalculia affects in terms of men and women. So it's across the board at the moment. There's no research to say that.
And why might that be the case, do you think, that in single-sex schools, girls feel more confident to express themselves? I wonder.
I just think that in a single-sex schools, you don't have that competitive nature. The discussion revolved around boys are more likely to sort of jump straight in, give it a go, less kind of held back at all. Whereas in single-sex schools, it was felt that they were more open to sort of giving things a go.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight there. I'm wondering about parents, and we've spoken about this a little bit already, but for a parent in the early years, for a parent in primary, and for a parent in secondary, what can or should they be doing in terms of having that communication with the school to make sure that whatever's happening to support that child in the school environment is being maintained through into the home as well?
I think it's really important, and I would really encourage all parents to be able to sort of make that link with students. I've often seen lots of times where the communication is not there or it's lacking, and so we have teaching, especially in maths, where you're maybe teaching different techniques, and so they go into school and they'll be learning a different technique, so they're confused and end up doing a bit of both. I think it's important that we use the same concrete materials that we use in school as we do at home. We encourage that sort of game-playing environment, that we're playing games. Board games are really important to allow you to sort of look at counting on and counting back. Even things like snakes and ladders. The concept of counting forward and counting back, you go down the snakes, is really quite important. I think kind of schools need to parents need to be more positive about maths. I hate it when they say, "Oh, I've never been good at maths, so therefore that's probably where you get that from." So it's creating a really low bar for them. It means that they're less likely to sort of go the extra mile and perform much more harder in terms of that. Often the students with dyscalculia are working so hard just to keep up, and yet often it's not reflected in their sort of scores or the outcomes. I talk to a lot of teachers about homework, for example, and I think it's a significant point about homework. People with slow processing or people with dyscalculia, people find that maths hard. They're going to really struggle to do homework, and we have to, as teachers, as educators, we have to be really cognizant about that. Teachers say to me, "Oh, just do half an hour's worth." But half an hour to someone that struggles means that they're not going to get many done at all. And so then we're almost setting them up for failure, where they're going to take in their homework, never complete it. I always encourage teachers to sort of the less is more approach, to be able to give them maybe a top 5 questions to be able to do that. Often giving out a big worksheet with hundreds of questions. So I understand that's trying to develop mathematical fluency, But for the people that struggle, that's setting them up for failure, and they're never going to be able to achieve completing that worksheet.
Mm. Yeah, so in terms of those distinctive features between a school who has a really effective parent partnership and is supporting children with dyscalculia in a really good way, the key features of that are thinking about homework, thinking about the parental attitudes, and maybe having conversations with those parents, but also not setting children up to fail in terms of the tasks that they're set.
Yeah, I also, they need to reinforce what's being done in the class rather than going off and teaching something else, because that's what they know or like.
Parents or teachers need to do that?
Parents.
Okay.
So it's almost like led from what's being taught in the class, and you're not teaching anything new. You're reinforcing what's being done. That's much more effective.
I'm wondering about parents themselves who have dyscalculia or a neurodiversity and have good intentions to want to help their children to succeed in all areas, and particularly maths, but perhaps they don't feel able or confident to do that. I'm wondering what schools can therefore do to support parents as much as they're supporting children, or is that perhaps beyond their control?
Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time and effort to try and put top tips for both teachers, educators, but also for parents as well. So if you want to go to the website, Dyscalculianetwork.com, there's lots of really fantastic pieces of information on things to do and support your child. And also there's lots of stuff in there about co-occurrence between the different neurodiversities as well, so how that impacts on your maths.
Yeah, that's really useful to share about the resources that you've got and those top tips that feel could be quite easily shared with parents during a parents' evening or a timely meeting with parents or through the PTA. And also that concept of co-occurrence. So if a child has one neurodiversity, it's much more likely for them to be able to see another. I think that feels like a really good, useful tool for parents to be aware of. So for schools who want to embed oracy effectively, that partnership is going to be really important. But I guess internally within that school, it feels like to fully embed this over time, you would need the support of the senior leadership team, wouldn't you? And a real joined up sense of working across all content areas. Yeah,
absolutely. We do a lot of in-school training and there's a lot of communications across the country where we talk about what dyscalculia is, how it shows in the classroom, and teaching strategies to help both at home and in the classroom. We're also great supporters of teaching assistants. As often interventions are done by teaching assistants under the guidance of the teacher. And so they're the ones that kind of like often need as much as or even more support, because maybe they're less qualified or less experienced. So we provide a lot of sort of separate training and support for them. I think also on our website, I think what's really fundamental for to support people is we just launched a new section of the website for children. And within that section, we have a number of videos of children talking about their struggles in maths. And I think that we talk about safe spaces and safe talk. To see a peer talking about them, oh, that's me, that's exactly describing how I feel. I've never been able to talk about it. I think seeing someone else of your own age talk about something is really empowering in terms of being able to talk about some of your struggles in that.
And that feels particularly pertinent for children who don't have dyscalculia and don't really understand what that child might be experiencing. So I'm wondering how those resources might be useful for, again, all children as part of an assembly or a separate conversation, just to begin to understand difference in more specific ways.
So, especially for maths anxiety, because I think maths anxiety isn't just exclusive to dyscalculics or people that struggle with maths. You might have missed certain lessons and you might have missed that geometry type lesson. So every time it comes back up in whatever form it comes up, you're going to feel really anxious about that because you don't really get it, because you missed that sort of early understanding and stuff. So it's really important to be able to allow that talk about safe talk, so that you can say, well, you know what, I'd really like to have some more information, more input from a teacher or from the learning support to be able to help in that particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. And your mention of Safe Talk there brings us back to the start. So we've gone full circle. That's been a really useful episode in terms of different opportunities we can embed within the classroom to enable children to talk and develop their oracy skills around mathematical concepts, giving some really helpful advice around effective partnerships with parents, but also the internal work that needs to take place. And I'm sure we'll highlight some of the resources in the podcast notes for listeners to listen, to read along, to read as long as they listen along. Thank you so much, Rob. That's been great. I would like to say a huge thank you to our guest, Rob, for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Educators podcast with me, Dr. Shaddai Tembo, and Rob Jennings. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your setting and links to relevant resources.